I want to thank you all for coming here today to honor my dad, Bob, Uncle Bob, and Grandpa Bob. I know some of you traveled a long way to pay your respects, and I know my dad would have loved to see us all together here. I also know there's some that are not here today that have reached out in beautiful sentiment and are here in thought and prayer. And our oldest brother, Jim, is here virtually watching this live, thanks to Pastor Will. We are very grateful. So when I think of who Dad was, scientist comes to mind. While music may have been his first passion, he chose the academic path of science and became a nuclear physicist. One of the highlights of his career, at least from my perspective, was the work he did for Bettis to develop the first nuclear-powered submarine. To be honest, I often bragged about this as if it makes me smarter by association. I was also very impressed throughout the years that when something went awry with a nuclear reactor, Dad was often involved in assessing the situation. And while Mary Jo nicknamed him Plutonium Bob, fortunately he never glowed, never appeared to have any impacts. Of course, he was focused on the safety of nuclear energy. He was well respected by his colleagues, several of which kept in touch with my dad through his retirement, and even with myself and my stepbrother since he moved to Florida and his disease got the better of him. One colleague in particular stands out. When Dad moved to Pittsburgh to work for Westinghouse in the contract for Bettis, he noticed a car in his apartment complex that had a North Dakota license plate, and he chased it down, not only to find another coworker at Bettis, but someone who would then become a friend for over 60 years, Jack Sorensen. And Jack and Joan and their 3 daughters and granddaughter and grandson are here with us too. Relationships were so meaningful, and this one, their family. What is also noticeable about Dad is that his scientific thinking. So to speak, it was used in his approach in life. When faced with an obstacle or decision, he was deliberate. He liked to gather the facts, see what more he could learn, and only after careful consideration provide a solution or suggestion. He encouraged others to do the same. When his children and probably colleagues had an issue, he was more than willing to provide guidance and support, but ultimately felt that the individual needed to come to their own conclusion. In fact, when he would help Jeff with his math homework, he would write several pages of notes on various ways to get to the simple answer, focused on the process versus just the outcome. And when I called to tell him that I failed physics in college, his response was, "That's okay. Many do the first time. You try again with a different professor and you should be fine." It's relieved. Dad's love of music was a wonderful theme throughout his life, perhaps sparked by his mother's piano playing. He led and sang in many choirs, on and off throughout his life. He played the trombone and trumpet, dabbled with the piano, and took pleasure in teaching my brothers Jeff and Michael how to play one of his all-time favorite songs, King of the Road. He loved big band music, and later in life held season tickets to the San Francisco Symphony. Even in his late stage of illness, he would hum when he didn't remember the words anymore. And in the end, when not much response was left, he would still tap his foot to the beat of the music. When Dad passed, I was clearing his things from the memory care unit. Many staff members came by, went out of their way to tell me what a kind, sweet man he was. He was an honest man of integrity. and was thoughtful on how he approached his life. He loved to engage in philosophical discussions, explore various religions, and continually look for ways to improve himself, even in the last months of his life. What I found so endearing was his thoughtfulness, gratitude, and desire for meaningful relationships until his final days. When he got to the point of losing his ability to put words together in a meaningful way, he would still say very clearly, "Thank you," to anyone that helped him, or "bless you," if anyone sneezed. And on Father's Day, when he wasn't really responsive, before I left, I said, "Thank you for being my father." And a big smile came across his face. Speaking of relationships, Dad had a few. After the divorce from my mother, he married Mary Ann Elder. As if 7 kids weren't enough, let's add a few more. And what one of my siblings told me was, it was kind of an easy transition because they were our neighbors. They were married 27 years until Mary Ann tragically died in a car accident. A little while after that, he met a woman named Julia, who became the love of his life. They traveled together, went back to her country a few times, England. He gained a liking for Guinness beer and took time to tour cathedrals. She unfortunately passed unexpectedly due to cancer after about 3 years together. He then met Jean, a different Jean, who was a very nice companion for him. Unfortunately, she developed Alzheimer's disease, and he helped care for her for several years. And then there were more losses. Jeanette, Elizabeth, Michael, John, my dad's siblings. While I know these times were difficult for him, I think his views on life, belief in something bigger than us, Al-Anon meetings, being with family, and his desire to keep improving himself, that kept him going. One of the things that Dad enjoyed a lot was wonderful meals and family. Mary Ann was a phenomenal chef. Her kids have taken after her. And while he was so fortunate to have such wonderful food around him all the time, his real love was for sweets. He had a particular dark chocolate from Trader Joe's that he kept at the house. And when he came to Florida and was no longer driving, he would tell me about 2 weeks ahead of time, when he thought he was going to be out, of chocolate to remind me. It was it was always top of mind for him, that and his green tea. Dad also stayed very active, something I should model better. In his 70s and 80s, he was doing Pilates, taking his walks most days down by the ocean, and in his earlier years played quite a bit of tennis with Mary Ann, although I heard he wasn't all that great, but he went out there and did it. He loved sports. Early on, he was a Minnesota Vikings fan, then the Steelers for a little bit, and then it was all 49ers. He followed college teams, basketball teams, enjoyed watching professional tennis, which is something that we could always chat about. As he knew his time was nearing, he relayed to me and others that he was ready to die when it was his time. He had done everything he could for his kids and those he loved. Some years ago, he had told Jim that he wanted it to be known that when he died, that he had done his best. And that is all any of us can do each day, is the best in that moment and try to do better. Dad, you did your best, and we thank and love you for that.